Good evening, everyone. Tonight is August 11th, 2020. It's getting a little late, but today is the day that we found out that Kamala Harris will be running for vice president on the ticket with Joe Biden. What that means, of course, is that Gavin Newsom will be appointing someone to complete Kamala Harris's term. That also means that there will be another a race for that Senate seat in 2022, where whoever Gavin Newsom appoints will have to put themselves before the voters. So what I am announcing tonight is that I will be a candidate in that primary, which is so far scheduled to occur in March of 2022. That gives us about 19 months between now and that primary to talk about issues and the situation that we're really in a way that I can almost guarantee you no one else will talk about it. That's not because I think I'm anything special. I think that I have a very unique set of experiences since about 1993 when I first got active in politics. All of those will come out during the campaign as far as where I come from, who I am. And that is the question in this campaign, because here we are in a world where we find ourselves in this COVID-19 crisis, which really is a crisis of course, leadership, but also of the economy. We really should have known in March of this year, before COVID-19 hit in the way that it did, and we shut down, etc. We should have known that we were on track for some kind of iceberg, some kind of financial iceberg, economic iceberg. It's been a long time in the making. I just finished reading a book that I highly recommend called The Hard Hat Riot, if I can get this right, the way the angle is, by David Paul Kuhn. Very important book for anybody to read in this country, Democrat, Republican, Independent. You have to understand that between 1970 and the present, 1968 in particular and the present, we have gone down the wrong path. I will be getting into this during the campaign, but it did start in the sense of a real breakdown in 1968. Now, of course, I was born in 1973. And I've kind of joked that, some people talk about a Truth and Reconciliation Committee for this country, or commission, excuse me. And I say, well, honestly, there probably shouldn't be anybody that was born before the Summer of Love, or let's say 1968, on that committee, because what we've had for 50 years is essentially a non-aggression pact between most people born after 1945 and before 1970, to not discuss fundamentally what has gone wrong. It's so easy to pick on Trump. It's so easy to pick on other candidates that I won't mention right now. But there's a lot of issues that for people my age in particular, I'm in my mid-40s, and then there's people, of course, that are younger, the millennials and others. There really has to be a real discussion about what went wrong, such that so many things that were on the table in the 1960s, the question of racism, particularly toward blacks and black families, black men, the economic situation, the environment, and other issues like this that people say are so important to them. Well, why is it that every one of these categories of issues has gotten worse? Essentially, right? Why would we be reduced to calling a whole section of our population a basket of deplorables, instead of wondering, what have we done to create a situation where many of those people who used to be FDR Democrats will no longer even talk to us? That's what I want to discuss during this campaign. And I think there's a lot that I'm bringing to the table that I think is unique, as I think I said before. The First of all, I'm from Los Angeles, but I was born in Madera. I was born in the Central Valley. There's a story behind that, in that my parents, were runaways from LA, and they were teenagers that had a baby. They were pregnant, and so they went up to Madera with some family, and had me up there at Madera Community Hospital, a brand new Hill Burton Hospital in 1973. Hill Burton is something I'll talk about during the campaign. I was brought back down to LA with the rest of my larger family, or my extended family, and I grew up in Los Angeles, where my family's been at this point for almost 100 years. I also lived for 10 years in the Bay Area. So I have had the experience in California, and when I was in the Bay Area, I was an organizer. So I was in all of the many of the Northern California counties, and in the Central Valley, in Modesto, in Stockton, in a number of other areas up and down the valley, up into Sacramento. So I know the state, but more than that, I've actually traveled and worked in probably 20 to 25 states in the United States. And I particularly was struck by the work I did in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and the East Coast, New York, New Jersey, and Philadelphia area in particular. Because these are the areas that we cynically refer to as the Rust Belt. And I don't accept that at all. I find that to be an insult. I never use that term. I think it's a shame what has happened to these communities. And I think even here in LA, when I grew up as a young, I can remember in the late 70s, knowing many men in my extended family who were in union jobs, decent jobs. And these were men who did not go to college. Many of them either barely got out of high school or did not get out of high school. Some of them had volunteered to be in the military in the 1960s and early 70s. My father almost joined the military with as his brother had during the Vietnam War. But my father found out that my mother was pregnant. So I'm giving out a lot of information here, but just to say that I come from a background where four of my uncles served in the military. One of my great uncles was in the Army in World War II. My middle name is George, the English spelling of George, and I'm named after him. Because we're an American family. We're Americans of Mexican, indigenous, and Spanish descent. My family goes back to the New Mexico area, and in that case, we've been here. At least the newest immigrants from Mexico to what's now New Mexico from my family came a generation before the Mayflower. And then, of course, with my Indian roots from Mexico and the Southwest, we have been here from time immemorial. So there's a story to be told about all that in terms of representing California and the West. I think it would be an honor to do that. But I want to do it by organizing in the way that we used to do. I have no criticisms that I want to levy on any of the candidates or potential candidates that are out there. I will just say that I for one am sickened by the party machine, by the rent seeking, by people who surf around for their next job. I won't mention this person by name, you can look it up, but there is someone who was a member of the U.S. Congress, who resigned from Congress and said, I'm leaving because I can't get anything done here, and I'm going to go run for office in Los Angeles County, where there's an open seat, and I have a good shot at helping people there. I have no respect for somebody who leaves Washington and tells me they couldn't fight. I'm sorry. I have respect for you as a person, but I don't have respect for that kind of political stance. I think that what we have to do is really fight it out. And the Senate, in particular, is definitely a mess. It isn't just Mitch McConnell and the leadership on the Republican side. It's that where the question really is, where are the true profiles in courage? There was just an award show or an award event for the LA Democratic Party where there were awards for profiles in courage handed out. I don't really know if those awards meet the standard that our late president and late Senator John F. Kennedy set for profiles in courage. I do not know. So I want to have essentially a genuinely, as Socratic as it can be, a genuine campaign where we actually talk about, not the issues, but I'll put it to you this way. I borrowed a quote from one of my favorite organizers and statesmen. Some people do call him a politician, but Abraham Lincoln, when he announced he was running for state house in 1832, he said something like this: "My politics are short and sweet, like the old woman's dance. I'm in favor of a national bank. I am in favor of the internal improvement system and a high protective tariff. These are my sentiments and political principles. If elected, I shall be thankful. If not, it will be all the same." That's the statement of a true organizer. And some of the particulars are definitely things that I support. Two that I'll talk about just briefly is his statement about a national bank and the other internal improvements. I am proud to be a member of the Coalition for a National Infrastructure Bank, a coalition of grassroots organizers and institutional representatives from around the country, representing trade unions, other institutions, other constituencies. Some are state representatives, elected officials, and we've gotten statements of support from many cities, counties, and even state legislatures. At least are debating passing resolutions supporting what's now become House Resolution 6422, the National Infrastructure Bank Act of 2020. To give you the short version, and you can look it up online at nibcoalition.com. The short version is a national infrastructure bank is modeled on Hamilton's National Bank, which we're all learning a little bit about now that Lin-Manuel Miranda's musical is so popularly discussed, at least. But the National Infrastructure Bank is modeled on about 3 or 4 different national banks that we've had in our history. The national bank that Lincoln is talking about in the 1830s was our second national bank that was taken apart by Jackson and some others in that period. The third national bank was essentially the policies of the greenback, and Lincoln was killed before he could solidify a genuine third national bank. The sort of third national bank A, right, was what Roosevelt did in the 1930s. It was started under Hoover, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, but it was really turned into, together with the Federal Reserve under Mariner Eccles, a national banking system, a directed credit system. So we haven't had a real national bank in this way for almost 90 years. And what we'd like to do with the National Infrastructure Bank is take a portion of our national debt. Before COVID-19, we had the figure of $4 trillion. It would probably be higher now, but $4 trillion came from the deficit that the American Society of Civil Engineers has put together in terms of what we should spend to just get our infrastructure back to the level it should be. So this is roads, bridges, waterways, water systems, but also high-speed rail. We should have regional high-speed rail systems at least. So the $4 trillion is not new appropriations. It's actually repurposing existing debt. So you take $4 trillion out of our national debt, which again, at the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis was around $25 trillion, crazy enough in terms of the amount, but you take a portion of that, let's say you even made it 20% of our national debt, and you make the holders of this debt preferred stockholders in the new National Infrastructure Bank, so they get 2% more per year on the debt they're holding in the form of stock held in this National Infrastructure Bank. But this money is directed solely for the purpose of infrastructure projects directed to states, directed to other local municipalities. There'll be a board, there'll be all these details that you can read in the bill. But the idea is to prove again that we can rebuild our physical economy, rebuild those elements of our actual economy that we need. Frankly, this could have been started in the spring, and we would have been able to rebuild or extend the capacity we need for healthcare and schools to get ourselves out of this crisis. One of the conference calls I was on with this Infrastructure Bank Coalition, one of the trade union leaders from, I believe, Pennsylvania was mentioning that recent studies have shown that the coronavirus has spread the least among construction workers. So we should look into that. And again, it's time for a modern New Deal. One of the things in terms of my work is since 2016, I've run a consultancy called the New Deal Group and a small hybrid political action committee called the New Deal PAC. In 2018, I started a podcast called New Deal Radio, which you can find on on the New Deal Now website. And as I become an actual candidate for Senate, I'll have to move away from being the director of that PAC. But the work that I did on the podcast, I'm very proud of. I worked with the recently departed Edward Kleinbard. We're so sorry to have lost him, a professor at USC who wrote a book called We Are Better Than This in 2015, which also called for a national infrastructure bank. He and I were working together, and you'll see on the first few episodes of my podcast in 2018 that he was very excited about my work on the New Deal. So again, I just wanted to announce my campaign tonight. I will not pretend to be a professional politician, but I will definitely show you that I am a professional organizer, a real Californian, and someone who just cares deeply about this country. I will tell you more about myself and the things I've been doing as the weeks come along, but I didn't want to take too much of your time tonight, and hopefully you can ask some questions here in the comment section. Sorry, my computer's angry with me. Maybe it wants to go to sleep. But good night, and we'll be talking again soon.